Hello everyone. Today we're going to discuss about proof. This is for quarter 2, week 8. So before we discuss this topic, so I have some definition of terms na I would like to share na magagamit natin for this lesson. So the first one ay conjecture. A conjecture is a conclusion made from observing data. So it means this is another term for conclusion. So this is a conjecture that made from observing data. So there are some books na conjecture ang ginagamit nila, which means that is a conclusion. So the second one is the counterexample. So this was discussed sa week 6 to 7. So formal definition ay counterexample refers to a case that shows that a conjecture is not valid. So, yun ang ibig sabihin nun. Diba, doon sa ating conditional statement, chine-check natin kung true or false. So, pag false, that is not valid. So, bakit not valid? So, we give a counter-example para masustain natin or masuportahan kung bakit false or not valid yung sagot natin. Then we have a proof. So this is a sequence of true facts, statements placed in a logical order. So this is our topic for today. So a sequence, so may pagkakasunod na true statements in logical order. So another type of reasoning is deductive reasoning. Since we have discussed the inductive reasonings before. So deductive reasoning, which uses facts, definitions, and accepted properties in a logical order to write logical arguments. So logical arguments include at least one premise and a conclusion. The premise must be valid to have a valid conclusion. So yun yung sa deductive reasoning. So one more example of deductive reasoning is from the word itself, deductive. So this means from general to specific example. So that is also a keyword. Deductive means general to specific. So what is premise? So this is a noun, a previous statement or proposition from which another is impaired or follows as a conclusion. So the synonyms can be proposition, assumption, hypothesis, thesis, presupposition. So premise is also the hypothesis. So, mas familiar tayo sa word na hypothesis. Pero sa ibang book, they use premise. So, that's why I include this dito sa aking video. So, there are two laws of deductive reasoning to consider. So, the first one is the law of detachment. So, if P implies Q, is a true conditional statement, P is true and Q is true. So, ito yung law of detachment. Magagamit natin ang law of detachment kung ang P or the premise or the hypothesis is true and the conclusion is also true. So, let's have an example. CJ knows that if he will not study his module in math a day before the test, he will not get a good score in the test. CJ did not study his module in math today, so he concludes that he will not get a good score for tomorrow's test. So that is our example. That is the statement. So how can we apply the law of detachment? So first we have to identify the P or the premise, and the Q, which is the conclusion or the conjecture. So when we analyze the arguments, if the arguments are valid, so the premise is if P, then Q. So if CJ will not study his module in math a day before the test, then he will not get a good score. So the premise is CJ did not study his module in math a day before the test. And the conclusion, therefore, he will not get a good score in the test. If P, then Q is true, and P and Q are true, the arguments are valid. So that is the first example for the law of detachment. So let's have another example. If n is an odd number, then the remainder is 1 when divided by 2. 11 is an odd number. Therefore, the remainder is 1 when 11 is divided by 2. So, the premise, if P, then Q. So, if n is an odd number, then the remainder is 1 when divided by 2. That is the premise. Premise or the P, 17 is an odd number. Conclusion, Q, therefore, the remainder is 1 when 17 is divided by 2. Because 17 divided by 2 is 8, remainder 1. So, in the example which is 11, so 11 is an odd number. So, therefore, the remainder is 1 when 11 is divided by 2. Because 2 is 11 divided by 2 is 5, remainder 1. So, the arguments are all valid. So, by given an example from the first statement, then i-detach natin yung premise pati yung conclusion. So, 17 is an odd number, true. Therefore, the remainder is 1 when 17 is divided by 2, so that is also true. So, it means both arguments are all valid or true. So, there is the second law, which is law of syllogism. It tells that if P implies Q and Q implies R are true conditional statements, then P implies R is true. So dito, kung matatandaan nyo yung transitive property of real numbers, it can be P is equal to Q and Q is equal to R, then P is equal to R. So that is the transitive property. So ibig sabihin, yung naulit na magkatulad ay hindi mo na isusulat. So you just drop that statement. So yung first at yung second lang. And then, for the law of syllogism, may major premise or hypothesis, then may minor premise. So, yung minor premise is related to the major premise. So, meron siyang two parts, the law of syllogism. So, example 1, if Joy visits Bicol, then she will spend a day in Albay. So, that is our major premise. if she will stay a day in Albay, so makikita na inulit yung conclusion doon sa major premise naging hypothesis sa minor premise. If she will stay a day in Albay, then she will go Kagsawa Ruins. Okay. So, ano napansin nyo? Yung major premise na then she will spend a day in Albay, sa minor premise, naging if she will stay a day in Albay. So, no? Parehas. So, our P is Joy visited Bicol. Our Q, she will spend a day in Albay. And our R, she will visit Kagsawa Ruins. So, since P implies Q is true, and Q implies R is true also, by the law of syllogism, you can conclude that P implies R is true. That is, if Joy visits Bicol, then she will visit Kagsawa Ruins. So that is your conclusion. So the conclusion is valid since the two premises are true. So, diba sa hypothesis, Joy visited Bicol. So, ibig sabihin, nasa Bicol na siya. Tapos yung ating conclusion, she will spend a day in Albay. Yung Albay ay nasa Bicol region din. And then, Kagsawa Ruin is also in Albay. Kaya yung P or the hypothesis is true. Yung conclusion ay also true. At yung R, the minor premise, is also true. That's why our conclusion is valid since the two premises are true. So let's have example 2. If you eat vegetable, then you become healthy. So that is the major premise. If you become healthy, then you will not get sick. That is the minor premise. So makikita na may naulit. So our P is you eat vegetable. Ang ating Q ay you become healthy. At yung ating R, you will not get sick. So you eat vegetable. That is true. You become healthy. That is also true. And you will not get sick. That is also true. So by law of syllogism, the conclusion is P implies R. If you eat vegetable, then you will not get sick. The two premises are valid or true. So example 3. If it is winter, then you will wear a wool sweater. So that is a major premise. If you wear a wool sweater, then you are a sheep. Minor premise. So the conclusion, if it's winter, then you are a sheep, which is not valid or false. So since you are not a sheep, of course, also the original statement are not true, specifically the second statement, unless you are a sheep. Okay, so dito this argument is not valid or false. So that's our example 4. All animals have 4 legs. That is the major premise. Snake is an animal. Minor premise. So snake has 4 legs. So that is the conclusion. So the conclusion is invalid since the major premise is wrong. Not all animals have 4 legs. So we have now the word puzzle. So the direction is write down 10 words related to week 6 to 8 lesson. You may see the word horizontally, vertically, diagonally, or reading word backward to get the words. So lahat ng words na makukuha nyo dito ay related na sa ating previous topic and our topic for today. So you send your answer through FB Messenger. You just send me a private message. So for example, indirect. So, yun. Susulat nyo indirect. So, meron dyan 10 words. In any order, you have to write it at wrong spelling wrong. So, that is the direction. So, you may send it until February 26. That is our deadline. And thank you for your watching.